Smitty is wired, and things are about to go down, well, kind of are already going down, between the Donovans and the Sullivans. Stay tuned as we discuss Ray Donovan Season 7, Episodes 6 through 8.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman, and I'm here to discuss Ray Donovan Season 7, Episodes 6 through 8. It is actually just me today, so I'm going to be breaking down the episodes. I'm going to go episode by episode so that it's a little bit clearer about what we're talking about. And so if you wanted to follow along, we're going to start with episode 6, Inside Guy. Be sure to stay tuned until the end because I'm going to go over our weird crime segment. And yeah, we've got a weird one. And yes, it involves Florida. And I'm going to go into predictions at the very end. So to start, we have Susan Russo in the chat. Hey, Susan. Susan actually is part of our Restless Rap. She's one of our Restless Rap fans too. So this is especially cool having her here. And so I will just, Susan, if you have any comments, you are my co-host today until we have other people coming in the chat. I'm going to dive right in and start talking about this because we had some insane developments over the last 3 episodes. We are gearing up toward the end. Obviously there's only 10 in the season, so 2 more. Okay, let's start with at the top of 6. We had Mickey and Sandy, and we got into this business with the tapes. And we've been seeing this, the tapes being what O'Malley had recorded during the time that they were dealing with this heist. And this is a little bit later, but I just want to say now that what I especially appreciated about these 3 episodes is that unlike the past with Ray Donovan, this particular set, we actually got some fleshed out flashbacks with actors portraying the younger version of Mickey and Jim Sullivan and Ray, and they were great, and it really fleshed out a lot of questions that we had, at least for me anyway. So we get into all of this with the tapes, and we find out that Mickey did grab all those tapes. We know, too, that he's using Daryl to kind of help him, and that Daryl's just kind of going along and working with him and doing this. We don't know yet, but eventually what kind of comes out from all of this is that Mickey's doing it not so much for himself and to blackmail Jim to get his money back for the whole debacle with the heist of 77. But Mickey starts claiming pretty early on, eventually, that it has to do with this being about his kids. As I'm watching this, and I know we're talking about episode 6, but I'm just going to say my overall opinion of Mickey these 3 episodes is that I have finally realized that you can't trust a word that he says, and that you never know what he actually means or who he's going to try and what he's trying to do, what his aim is with everything, all of his moves that he's making. So what we know in 6 is that he has the tapes, that he's going to try and blackmail Jim Sullivan with them in order to get back the money that he lost in that heist that they kind of screwed him out of. Okay, so we have all of that going on with Mickey. Meanwhile, Molly and Ray, we've seen them start to get closer and have a relationship. And it seems to be, in this particular episode, they made it a point that wherever Ray and Molly were going, they were getting blocked. So at Ray's place, we have Bunchy, who now wants to work for Ray. And then we also have everything going on with Smitty. And the storyline with Smitty made me especially sad because we know that things with Bridget are not the best. And that Smitty is very... he's in a very angry state right now. And it's hard. Like, it seems like in 6 and 7, and even 8, it seemed like he just did not want anything to do with Bridget, and there was no salvaging the marriage. So we get all of that with Smitty. We get Bunchy saying we get Bunchy basically saying he's having an issue. And then Ray says, hey, come and work for me. And that's it. It's just like that. Bunchy just goes and begins to do jobs for Ray, because the whole thing with him is that he's trying to help that kid that he shot. And then, okay, so just to kind of wrap all of this storyline up, with Ray and Molly, we get this scene where when they couldn't actually, like, be alone at Ray's place, they go to Molly's and Jim is waiting there. And that's when things start to get a little bit more interesting, because I got this sense right off the bat that there had been this I don't want to say father and son relationship between Ray and Jim, but that almost there was more of a respect there that Ray did not have for Mickey ever, especially after a certain point in his childhood. Jim specifically starts to bring up O'Malley, and starts talking about the heist. And it's, we start to learn a little bit more about it. I didn't think we were going to get as detailed as we ended up getting, where we did eventually see what was going. We kind of saw, well, we did see what happened with the heist later. But for this episode, we just really got this sense that O'Malley was incredibly wired up. They even say wired like Richard Nixon, and that he had taped all these conversations with Jim that Jim did not want anyone to have or see. And it seems like Ray is going to work with Jim to try and get the tapes back from Mickey, because obviously we know how Ray feels about Mickey, that there's nothing, like he does not like his father. He's in therapy trying to work through it, but we know that it's not really, that at the end of the day, Ray will probably never fully forgive Mickey, and that's really shining through in these episodes where Ray is very quick to jump and help Jim. We're going to find out later that maybe this isn't the smartest choice. Ray at this point, he doesn't know that Mickey is officially still in the U.S., but he starts to dig. He sends Bunchy to Lufthansa to talk to a woman named Patty. It turns out, they find out there that Mickey did not leave. But then the big thing is that so we get all of that. We also see that Declan, Jim's son, comes back into the picture. And what I found especially interesting with this is that we're starting to get the sense that even though I see Ray and Jim aligning, we're starting to get this sense that there's something deeper there, that Jim actually was, Jim was kind of screwing Ray too. And we see that when Declan comes back into the picture. And Declan obviously being the son who Jim decided was not going to take over the company. He wasn't really going to get much of anything, just, a certain amount of money, peanuts compared to the rest of it. And then the other two kids were going to run the company and get control over everything else. So Declan comes back in, and my thing is that at this point I started to think, well, even if Ray and Jim continue down a road where they are working together and helping each other, this guy Declan's involvement is going to change everything and going to change the dynamic and basically tear down whatever allegiance Jim and Ray have with each other. Plus, it just feels like, as we started to learn later, Jim may not have done the greatest things beyond Mickey. He may have also done terrible things to other members of the family, too. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so we kind of have that all laid out. With Smitty, this is where we're still seeing unrest with Smitty. He's not willing to forgive Bridget. I think that he's being kind of dumb, though, and that he's talking to Terry about it and talking to Ray about it. And I get it. These are now his in-laws and, his family through marriage. But it to me, it's like that saying goes, in, that some people say that blood is thicker than anything else. And so when I watched Smitty talking to the family about all of this, I started to cringe. I was like, okay, Smitty, like, keep it. You don't want to get too involved with with her blood relatives, because they're going to take her side. Like, that's usually how that works. And I just started getting really worried for him. But one of the things that Terry says in this scene is that it's like there's no, whether Bridget and Smitty end up breaking up or not, Smitty's always going to be part of the family because of the cops that they killed together. And to me, that was pretty powerful. And I think scared Smitty pretty badly, because he realized that, yeah, like, Bridget did this to him. Whether she stops or whether this keeps going on, he's stuck. And it's not a typical situation where you can just get divorced and walk away. No, like, Terry basically forewarned him, listen, you're in this, you're with the Donovans for life now, get used to it. And so it's a sad situation for him, because we already know that he felt bad about the cops and was really uncomfortable being involved at all. Now the repercussions are that he's stuck in this, and stuck with a woman who will potentially cheat on him perpetually. Susan Russo, I knew Smitty was weak, but not this week. Yeah, I didn't expect the turn that we get with him a little bit later, but we'll talk about that. But I agree. I didn't know that he would. It's not so much that I didn't know that, like, he's trying to. Smitty was always very scared, but just later on when we find out about Peterson, it was a bit of a shock. But we'll get there in a moment. Okay. So we did get a little bit with Peterson in this episode. I'll touch more on that in a second, though, since we do get more. But the big thing is that she does start to quiz Smitty in 6. That's really all we see, though. The big thing that bugged me, I don't know how you guys felt, was when, and I think we had talked about this a couple episodes ago, was how the big alibi is that they went to the concert, and my question was, why were they not listening to the artist's music and actually learning about his songs? Because the thing is that, of course, if that's your alibi that you went to this concert, you should at least know a couple of songs. Peterson quizzed him on the lyrics. I thought, one, it was dumb that Smitty didn't listen, that none of them listened to the songs. Maybe Bridget knows them because she works with, Adam, but just the fact that no one else bothered to actually do some research on this. And Smitty, when Peterson questioned him, he could have said a million things. He could have even said, oh, well, I went to the concert because, Bridget's a fan, or I went because I was taken to the concert, but I'm not like, and if he didn't know the lyrics, which I think is fair, he could have come back and said, well, I don't know the lyric to that song, but I can tell you some of my favorite songs by the guy, and at least seemed a little bit like a person who had attended the concert. But Smitty was just really dumb about handling that, and they should have expected that Peterson was going to ask them about this. I'm surprised that they didn't, kind of factor that into all of this, but I guess they're kind of busy with this whole Sullivan and Donovan ordeal and family dramas. Okay, so the other big thing is that Bridget does talk to Adam, and she gets him to drop the charges that he's gonna place against Smitty. Again, it was a really awkward situation because Adam seemed pissed at Bridget. He seemed pissed off at Bridget when he should have understood that this was bound to happen, on some level anyway. And then on top of that, Bridget seemed very clear that she was going to stay with Smitty, which is not what she had been saying at the top of the season. She seemed more like she wanted to get divorced and was really into Adam, but now it's like she's flip-flopping, I guess because of the way that Smitty's acting and how pissed off he got. I almost wonder if she assumed that he would find out about, that he would take the news about Bridget's cheating and just say, whatever, that's okay. Probably, or, maybe because that's how Smitty usually reacts to everything else. So I'm wondering if that's what she expected. And now that she's seeing Smitty push her away like this, it's making her want him more, and that's the only reason she wants him. But it's not looking well for the two of them. Okay, the only other thing before we get to episode 7 is that at the end of this, the big moment was that Ray goes to Dusty Bottoms where he finds out that Mickey has been, and he ends up getting into this fight with Daryl, and it really comes out. I think what it was, stuck out the most to me is that Daryl and Ray, like, they usually just bury everything that goes on between the two of them, and they don't really talk about their emotions too much. But Daryl actually brought up, hey, you never really thought of me as your brother, did you? Like, you thought of me as, like, in the, just that guy, and like just a lot of issues that Ray usually seemed like he's okay with Daryl. But this sort of cemented the fact that they're not going to be okay as brothers anymore, and that Daryl's finally taking a stand. And we're going to see more of that in the next couple of episodes too. All right, so let's, the only other thing I want to mention is Mateo Santiago, the kid that Bunchy shot, does end up dying. And now Bunchy's kind of in this place where I feel like he doesn't know what to do with himself, because he was really pushing to help. And I felt from him that he was very unsettled, and that he almost might try to reach out to the child's mother again, to show some kind of, condolences, or to try and somehow make things right. But and then again, on the other side, Bunchy may already know that the child's death probably means a permanent, his mother being permanently angry with him, and holding a very deep grudge, considering. But we didn't really get into much more of that in the next 2 episodes. So episode 7 was the transfer agent. This is where we get into some of the flashbacks with Ray. And that was, to me, between these 2 episodes, they were my favorite. The actor who plays young Mickey, it could have been Jon Voight. That is how good this guy was. So round of applause for him. There were moments, like, that's a really hard thing to do. Normally when they pick another actor to play a younger version, like, I'm even thinking of Solo, and how they have somebody else playing Han Solo in that movie who's a younger version. And to me, like, not to get onto the topic of Solo here, but just as an example, while I enjoyed Solo, it's just hard because you see somebody else playing that character, and you can't really see that person as the character because they are different enough where it just takes you out of the narrative. With the actor playing the younger version of Mickey, I was not taken out of the narrative, and the same goes for the actor playing young Ray, both the young Rays, because in 7 we get like maybe 11-year-old Ray, it looks like, 12-year-old Ray, and he sounded and acted exactly like what I would have expected from a younger version of Ray, and that guy playing Mickey, it was dead on. So I very much appreciated that. I loved this deeper glimpse that we got into the backstory, and also how much of a joke that they thought Mickey really was. And that, to me, like, it said so much. It spoke volumes. The Mickey that we've seen the last 7 seasons, I mean, we get a much different perspective when we finally see Mickey, who is, I'm guessing, in his 30s at this point, 30s, 40s, something like that. Maybe a little bit younger, maybe. They didn't specify. They just said, it was implied that this was right, like 77, right before the heist. Susan Russo says, I liked the younger Ray too. B. Jordan says, yeah, that was cool. Hey, B. Jordan, welcome to the chat. So yeah, I appreciated all of that. And I wish, obviously they can't really go back, but I wish that we would have seen more of this sooner. But yeah, I definitely appreciated how much time we spent with the flashbacks, especially because it's relating this flashback to this B storyline, is complementing the main focus of the episode and of the season, really. So it's very interesting. And one of the things too is that when we see Mickey when we see younger Mickey, we get to see Claudette when she was first with him. We see baby Daryl, and we just see the way that he was stealing money from his wife and what that did to Ray. And there wasn't even the scenes that we see. There's not a lot of dialogue, but it's so rich that we get so much from just watching it. And it was fascinating. Okay, so this all kind of, as we're seeing this backdrop to what happened in the 70s, we kind of get the confrontation with Mickey and Jimmy, and we don't exactly see it, but basically Mickey abducts Jim, and we get this sense that what I didn't realize is how badly Jim had seen Mickey as a joke, which answers a lot of questions I had. So that he had seen that Jim had seen Mickey as a joke, and then logically it made sense that they would involve him in this heist that would later, Mickey thought that this whole heist was going to result in him having enough money for his family. He claims it was for all of his sons, but that's where I was saying earlier, where with Mickey, it doesn't feel like you can ever believe what he says. And that's part of the problem leading into this. And what because Daryl was in some of this scene too, and Jimmy starts hinting that there were ways that Mickey was kind of screwing his own family members. And that was another thing with Daryl, is that he didn't really verbally react to this, but you could just see the way that the wheels were spinning and what Jim's message was sending his way, and what Daryl was taking away from this, especially in the moment when, after bantering back and forth about what, basically Mickey just wants his cut of that heist that he never got. And so eventually when they settle on a price, I guess, it was what I think really sent Daryl over the edge was that instead, like Daryl's the son who's always been there and done everything for Mickey. He's always his right-hand man, always doing whatever Mickey asks. And I think Daryl felt like, if anything, that Mickey would trust Daryl to take care of this transfer. Hence the title of the episode, Transfer Agent, because we do get a bit with Moskowitz. But I think that really what set everything over the edge for Daryl is that he realized that Mickey didn't even trust him enough to put that transfer in his name, and instead was going to put it in did put it in Terry's name. And I think that any respect that Daryl had left for Mickey, it just went out the window, and that Daryl finally saw him for who he was. And I feel like we've always seen Daryl as the younger brother, and he's always fought to be a Donovan. And I've always seen him as not even just, sometimes you see people who are younger by age, but they don't act younger. Well, I've always seen Daryl as being a little, acting significantly younger than his older brothers, and not exactly having his place yet. And he's always trying to find where that place should be. With this moment, when we saw Daryl in the room with Jimmy and Mickey, I think he finally understood, I can't rely on Mickey anymore, and I need to take things into my own hands. And that's exactly what we saw, is that Daryl walks away, and we get the sense that he isn't going to come back with the certificate with the money that Mickey would cash. So B. Jordan Mick is hilarious, and he's very, very funny. Especially even the flashbacks were funny, and it was just like Mickey really is kind of a joke, and not to be rude about it, because he has had moments where he's not, but they're just watching him like he's almost like a caricature of himself. B. Jordan, I understand the characters better with the flashbacks. I definitely agree with that. Susan says absolutely B. Susan Russo, I love the old school lines. So speaking of funny moments with Mickey, when they were going back and forth about the gold, I actually wrote down this quote where he, Jim was like, Mickey, do you even know what compounded interest is? And Mickey said, I'm going to look it up on the internets. Daryl, look it up on the internets. Like internets as in, with an S, plural. And Mickey clearly had no idea what he was even talking about, and he's so out of the loop, and it kind of like called it right back to Mickey from the past too, with him kind of being this joke. And in seeing it from that perspective, it's clear that Jim still thinks that he's a joke, but Jim might be playing the rest of the family too. Okay, so we get all of that. Molly finds out that Mickey's not actually dead when we see this whole thing with the transfer agent. And that was a whole mess in and of itself. And that I felt bad for Molly because she obviously tried to step in and seems like she's really trying to stop this from escalating. And it's all over the tapes and what Mickey has. And we do see the tapes, and we see that it really does go back. There's a whole box of tapes. And we also learn at one point that Mickey's listening to the tapes, and so he knows that what's on them is going to be very devastating to come out in terms of what, obviously Jim Sullivan would not want those tapes out there. Okay. So let's kind of go back. So we had everything going on with Ray. He ended up... he wanted to find Mickey. That was his whole thing. And so we get this scene where he sets Sandy's house on fire. Not a huge fire, but enough where it brings Sandy back. And what impressed me about that scene was that this whole episode has been about legacy and Mickey doing this for his children and trying to give them money and make sure they were set for life. And we're comparing, like, obviously we have the Sullivans and the Donovans, and they both, like Jim Sullivan, who to me feels like a much more respectable man. Obviously has a crime background, so that, not in that sense, but respectable in terms of other people in the crime world respecting Jim. I got the sense that past and present, more people respect Jim as a crime leader, whereas Mickey, he's this guy who just never was going to get respect that way. And so here we have this kind of, not to be rude here, but this joke of a guy, Mickey, trying to leave a legacy for his family when all he's done is leave destruction. And not that Jim's any better, but it feels like he at least built something, even if it came from even if it came to him through illegal means, he seems to have built something more stable for his legacy. But Sandy drops this comment about Mickey leaving the Donovans his legacy, and Ray's line is, "He already left us his legacy. My mother's funeral, and trail of bodies and broken lies." That has to be one of my favorite quotes from these 3 episodes. Absolutely. B. Jordan, Sandy is a hoot. Love her. Yeah. Especially, Susan Russo. Love her. She, the rap music. Does anyone else love the fact that whenever we see her in the car, it's always like hardcore rap? And it sounds like pretty good music too, but it's like just not what you would expect from Sandy. Susan Russo, they give her some great lines. They really do. But at the end of 7, we get this showdown where, Ray shows up right as we're seeing, I think what I love the most is that right as we're seeing young Ray look at his father, like not even look at him, but like he's cooking, Mickey has come back. After, we just get this moment where Mickey could, or where Ray could, kill his father. And he goes in, and he doesn't seem like, young Ray seems way more determined to kill Mickey than we see with adult Ray in front of Jim. Adult Ray is, he has the gun aimed in Mickey's direction and he can't do it. And that's where Jim says, "I wonder, Ray, if you've still got it in you now," and that being to kill Mickey. And I feel like that's the direction we're going with this, is what side Ray will ultimately choose. Is he going to stick with the Donovans, and Donovans being Mickey, or is he going to turn and help Jim, who it's starting to sound like there are things that Jim did do against the Donovans that extend beyond Mickey. So let's talk about episode 8, Passport and a Gun. We had a ton, throughout these 3, we had a ton of things happening, but this is the episode actually where we get Mickey coming back after he does the time. We see the heist, which I thought was brilliant, and then Mickey comes back, and we see young Ray, who is he's just cooking, and we see him looking like he might actually kill Mickey, and that was so powerful. It's just crazy too, because after everything that Ray has been through, to see adult Ray unable to necessarily kill his father, we know he's in therapy. We know that he has a very complicated relationship with Mickey, and you can see it the way that Ray just looks at Mickey in the present. There's it's such a gray area. It's such a complicated mess of emotions for him. Susan Russo, I can't wait to find out what Sullivan did in the past. Yeah. And that's the thing that we keep hearing. Lots of hints that Jim Sullivan did something, and it might actually relate to Bridget, the sister Bridget, not the daughter. It might actually relate to her. And that was one flashback scene we got, which was the sister Bridget coming back to take care of little Molly. And this is when Ray's a little bit older, when he's now officially doing jobs for Jim. But it's almost implied that Jim might have taken advantage of Bridget, and that's what pushed her over the edge. Just seeing Bridget step out of the car, not that you can always tell when somebody is going through depression, but just seeing Bridget step out of the car, she seemed like, maybe she wasn't yet at the place where she ended up, where she would have, jumped off of a building. Who knows, though, what transpired between that moment and when she actually did. And I almost felt like maybe they were hinting that she did not jump off of a building, that she might have been pushed because of certain circumstances. We'll get into that a little bit more with predictions, though. We also got O'Malley's son in this, Gary, who tried to kill Jim at the beginning. And O'Malley is where we get a lot of this, Ray, do you know what he actually did? Because Ray is obviously defending Jim and trying to help him get these tapes back. Declan's involved too, and he's trying to get the tapes. And then the other interesting thing that was such a major part of episode 8 is everything going on with Daryl. Susan says, Ray and the dogs playing poker painting. Yeah, that was really funny too. And that even then with Ray, we get that he's very resourceful, and he ends up taking the jersey in place of payment. So I thought that was funny. But with Gary hinting that something deeper had happened. And then we get this scene with Daryl and Declan. Poor Jasmine. I did not expect that she was going to get shot like that. I did expect that Declan was going to mess with the deal with Daryl. And I don't know what Daryl was really thinking, that he would try and give, some of it back to Declan, and that, they would work something out. Daryl, that was his mistake, was trusting that Declan would honor a deal like that. Susan Russo, Declan is a nut. Yeah, he seems like he is on the verge of, I don't want to say a mental breakdown, because that's not what I'm feeling from him right now. But I just feel like Declan is that mad leader who is going to cause everything to explode. So poor Jasmine, though, she is a victim in this circumstance as Daryl's driving away. He doesn't end up giving the certificate back to Declan because they didn't give him the money that he was promised. Daryl flees, and unfortunately, that's when Jasmine dies. And now I feel like, and this is kind of getting into predictions, but I'm going to say it now. I feel like with Daryl, this is where he has changed from the Daryl that we've known for 7 seasons. This might be the moment where we're going to see him turn into more of, I don't want to say heartless, but more of a hardened person who is going to stop at nothing to get revenge what happened to him, because this, obviously he did care about Jasmine, and not just that, but he's now been screwed by Declan. He's been messed with Mickey. I just think that Daryl is now in a different place, and he's done with being the guy who was stepped on, and he's going to now try and branch out on his own and take matters into his own hands. He has the funds to do so. I don't see this necessarily ending well for him, like Claudette predicted at the beginning of the season, when she said, "You're going to get my son shot and killed." But in any case, we have everything going on with Daryl. The big reveal too is with Smitty. He has been wired by Peterson. I did not see that coming at all. I didn't think that Smitty would actually do that, but he mentions Bridget and he tells Ray that he's really sorry at the end, but that he didn't want to hurt. They threatened to hurt Bridget and he just couldn't let that happen. So obviously showing that Smitty, despite the circumstances, he still loves Bridget enough to help her and step in and be there for her. And protect her when he feels like he has to. But we don't know. With predictions, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, we can talk about what we saw in the previews, which kind of hint at where this is going. But the only other thing I would have mentioned before we get to our segments is that we did get a little scene with Bunchy and Terry, where Terry goes to grab the necklace for the woman who had left with him, who had been with the shaman. And they are successful, but only after Terry kind of attacks the shaman. But they do end up getting the necklace back. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Susan says, "No more fun-loving Daryl. I couldn't believe it." Susan also says, "No way was Declan going to give Daryl $2 million." Yeah, and I agree. And I think that Daryl's just done at this point. He's like, nope, I am tired of everybody taking advantage of me. And that now he's going to step into his own shoes as a powerhouse and go from there. All right, well, let's step into our segments and talk about our weird crime. Oh man, so I had fun when I found this one. So what do you get when you combine meth, a dog, and a naked man? You get this man. Naked man bites dog. Yes, in Florida. This was on Newser.com, and when I saw it, I knew this had to be this week's topic, because essentially this guy on meth was walking around outside. He was making bird noises, which I was laughing out loud when I first read that. And he bit a dog. Now, yeah, that, and as you can see, this was pretty interesting. I'm just going to read the last paragraph here. Police say that Watts, the man, then fled. When a deputy attempted to detain him, he punched the deputy repeatedly. A fair amount of tasing ensued to no effect. I guess when you're on meth and you're, making bird noises, tasing will not affect you. Cops then deployed a canine officer named Casper, at which point the report states that Watts got on his hands and knees and began to growl like a dog. There it is. He then growled like a dog. Casper eventually escaped and bit Watts' head. Charges: simple battery of a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest with violence, and aggravated battery of a service dog. Well, let me know in the comments in the chat what you think about that. JS loved the retro episode. Reminded me of what Animal Kingdom did. Susan Russo, Rachel found another good one. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, there's not much weirder than barking like a dog, making bird noises, and biting a dog. Poor dog. All right, well, let's talk about our predictions.
Your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Okay, so let's talk about the previews, because we essentially, what they shape these previews to show is that Ray is going to work with Peterson, which I would not have predicted that other than seeing it, but it looks like Ray is going to work with Peterson. What I'm guessing happens is that Ray ends up playing both Sullivan and working to get Mickey arrested. That is where I think this is heading, and that potentially Mickey will end up in jail after all is said and done, like he was supposed to. Like he was supposed to and stay in jail, so maybe they'll bring him back. But also, I don't think that Mickey is going to keep this alliance with Jim Sullivan, because I think it's going to come out that Jim, I don't want to predict this because it's so terrible, but I feel like Jim either attacked, maybe raped Bridget, and that's what caused her to really go over, and not want to live anymore, or that Bridget knew something she wasn't supposed to know, maybe relating to the tapes, and that Jim actually had one of his guys push her off the building. Because we've always gotten that it seemed kind of sketchy, and that it didn't really seem like her. So I almost wonder if that's where they're going with this, and that they're tying it back to everything we've always heard about the sister. I also think that Daryl is going to, as Ray is going about his business, I think Daryl is going to enact some kind of revenge on everybody. Declan, Ray, Mickey. I think he's going to try to put everybody in their place, and that he is really snapped this time. I don't want to say snapped, because maybe that's the wrong choice, but he's really gone to the dark side, as it were. And that, kind of like Claudette said, this could lead to his end just because of his involvement. Other than that, I don't think that Smitty is going to stay in the family. I think that he is done. I was surprised that Ray didn't do anything to him, but probably because he couldn't, because he knew that there were, FBI, there were agents out there waiting. I don't know if it's FBI or just cops. And Declan, I see the real battle for, kind of changing into Declan versus Ray. So we will see what happens with that. Until next week, my name is Rachel Goodman. You can find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman, or on Instagram on my author account at Rachel Radner Author. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat today and for being the co-hosts. We will see you back next week, same time, same place for episode 9. Until then, have a wonderful week, everybody.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.